Our third report in the Dashboard for Distribution series is a pivot table, or a series of pivot tables created with Power Pivot in Excel, accessing sales order processing data. And we're going to create a dashboard, if you will, just inside of Excel that's completely refreshable. And this report will give us lots of different ways to view data, and we'll review that as we go along. So let's begin. So we're going to just start with Excel. Now I'm using Excel 2013, and if you're using 2013, which I do recommend, you're going to need to have Professional Plus or an Office 365 subscription to get Power Pivot. It's a very powerful tool, and Excel is doing some very cool things with it in the future. So trust me, for those of you who need to do this kind of reporting, it is very worth getting the Professional Plus version. Okay, so what we're going to do is start by clicking on Power Pivot on our menu, and then we'll get our Power Pivot ribbon. And then we're going to choose to manage our data model, and it's going to open up an additional window. Now the data model is actually, if you will, a little miniature database for this particular Excel workbook that I'm working on. And this database, or this data model from Power Pivot, can hold millions of records from all kinds of different data sources. So we'll be able to create this dashboard using all different kinds of data sets, even in the same pivot table, if you will, right from this very data model in Power Pivot. So the first thing we want to do is get our data. And we're going to start out by getting sales order processing data. And as you guys know who work with me on a regular basis, you know that I like to utilize Victoria Uden's views. She does a remarkable job at putting these together. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of these now, and let's see if I can show it to you in a easier to read way. Here we go, page display. Okay, so we'll scroll 2 pages at a time. This is a very lengthy view that Victoria has done, but it is one that takes returns and makes them negative numbers. So she's done a lot of work. It also looks at both posted and unposted data. Now I have added a little bit to this, very little, but I did indeed add a little bit to it. So I will give you the link in this posting of where to go to a Victoria site, and I'll also give you the option of downloading my edited version. So I'm just going to copy all of this text and put it in my clipboard. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is choose from database, from SQL Server, because that's where my GP data is. Whoops. Did I minimize it or did I go too fast? Oh, there it is. Okay, and we'll enter in our server name. And my server name is Cherry. I'm going to enter in my SA password and tell it to save my password. And then I'll put in my database name. Now, if you're not familiar with what those answers to those questions are, then that's a good indication that you probably need to get someone to help you make the connection at least the first time, and then it'll be saved out there for you, and all you'll have to do is refresh it. I'm going to go ahead and click on Next. And I get the opportunity to either select from a list of tables or views that are already in the SQL database, or write a query. And for the sales order processing, I'm just going to copy the query over. Now I took Victoria's view and I removed the grant access at the bottom, and I removed the create view at the top, but I could have very easily went ahead and created the view and accessed the view directly in there, and we'll be doing that in just a moment for the customer balances. So I will just do write a query. I'll click on Next, and I'll paste my query in. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a friendly name. I'll call it SOP detail. And I'll get it to validate. And it tells me that indeed the SQL code is good. If I click on the Design tab, you'll see I get something very similar to my Studio. I can even execute it and see if I get data. And I do indeed get data, and the data looks correct. So that's good. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And choose Finish, and it will import the data into my data model. So I had 973 rows. This is a great way to utilize your data, not necessarily with a view. You might want to create the view in the system as opposed to doing the query. But if you use sales order processing and you have thousands upon thousands of rows, it will not choke Excel down the way that accessing it from Excel directly will, because Power Pivot is made to hold large volumes of data. Okay, so there's my first table of all my SOP data. And now what I want to do, I also want one of my widgets on my report to reflect customer balances at any given time. So I want to now connect to my SQL database, and I'm going to connect to the SmartList object for customers. So I'll go to From Database to SQL Server. Again, I'll enter in my server, but you can see I could just as well or just as easily access any other piece of data. I will then also key in my company name again, and I'll test my connection. Great. And I will go to Next. Again, it asks me. I'm going to select from a list of tables or views. Now, all of the SmartList objects that come out of the box in SmartList, they all actually come from a view that Microsoft writes for us, so we do not have to reinvent the wheel. Now, in this particular scenario, all of our views are at the very bottom, so you could just immediately scroll to the very bottom, and then you should be able to see the views. And all of the customer information is stored in a view called Customers. And let's see, Customer Items. There it is. I was all over it. Okay, so I'll just select this one. And I want to go into Preview and Filter. And now I could see all of the columns. Now if I went into SmartList and I chose Customers, clicked on the asterisk and then added columns and added every potential column, this is what I'd get. Now I don't need that many. All I really need is like customer name, customer number, and balance. So I'll unmark this and just choose the ones that I need, and it will significantly reduce what I need to choose from when I'm working on my system, or when I'm working on my pivot table. So let me find customer balance. There it is. Okay, so I have those three fields. I'll click OK and finish. And now it's going to import in all of those records, all of my customers with balances. And as I click OK, you can see I do indeed just have, whoops, I left off a column, didn't I? Well, that's okay. We'll leave this in here. This is fine, perfectly fine. We could get away with just customer number and customer balance. So now I have my SOP detail on one tab, customers on another. Now, one more thing that I do like to do is I like to bring in another table with dates and date options, and I'll show this to you. I just created it in Excel and I could reuse it over and over again. It is every possible date from January 1st, 2000 to December 31st, 2017. And I created formulas that extract the month name as a name and not just a number, the day of the month. So for January 1st, I've got Jan and 1. The day of the week that happens to fall on, which is Saturday. And you can see my formulas up here. The year in the month, so I can see 00-Jan, the quarter, and I have the year in the quarter. And then I like to just import this information in. And I will point out that you can see my tab is called Dates with Formula. Now what I'm going to do in my Power Pivot is I'm going to do one more import. This time I'll choose from Other Sources, and I'll scroll down and I'll select Excel. And now it's asking for the path. The file cannot be opened, so I'll select the path. After I have the path in, I will make sure to click that the first row is column headers. I'll test my connection, and then I'll click on Next and Finish. And this will now import all of my rows. You can see there were 6,400 of them. And now I have a formula for dates with formulas, and I have all of these fields, and they come over as Jan, they come over as day, and so forth. So now what I can do is link these dates to my sales order processing document date. So I'll click on View Diagram, and I will link them together. So I'm interested in linking these two together, so I'll choose Document Date and Date. And so now I can look at all my documents by day of the week, quarter, and so forth. Let's go back to Data View. And so now I have my three tabs, and I have linked together the two I'm interested in. So now all I have to do is go to Pivot Table and create a pivot table, which in Excel. Now if I click on just this box, I'll only get one pivot table. But if I click on this drop-down list, I can do a pivot table, a chart. I could do 2 side by side, 2 up and down, 2 charts. I could do all kinds of things. I'm going to go straight to 4 charts and let it populate on a new worksheet. So now my pivot tables are all laid out, so I have the beginning of my dashboard created for me. I'll start with chart 1. I'll just click on it. You can see I have my handles around it so that I know this is the one I'm working on. And on this one, I want it to be my top 10 items by sales. So I'll go to my SOP detail and I'll find my items. I will grab the item number and put it in the axis, and then I'm going to find my extended price and put that in the values. And now my chart's beginning to formulate. Now I like to format these as numbers because that's our currency, because that is indeed what they are. So in the value I'll choose the drop down list, value field setting, number format, and change the currency. And you've heard me say this many times already. This will change it, keep it the same format always. So now we have that done. So now I want it to be the top 10 items by sales. So what I'll do, on my item number, I'll choose from the drop down list. I'm going to sort not by A to Z or Z to A, because that will just sort numerically or alphabetically by the item number. Instead, I'll choose more sort options, and I'll tell it I want it to be descending by the extended price. And what this will do is it'll put the one with the most sales first and work its way down. Now I'm only interested in the top 10, so again I'll choose the drop down list here on item number, and I will choose value filter, and I will say top 10. So I want the top 10 items by extended price, and I'll click OK. And now I have my top 10 items by sales. So I want this to be reflective of what it is. So I'll just click on this name here and then tell it I want change the name to top 10 items by sales. So now I have that chart done. So nice and simple. Alright, so let's go to chart number 2. I want the top 10 items by quantities. So again, I'll choose SOP detail. I'll find my items, drag item number to the axis, and this time I want to drag quantity to the values. And then I'll go through the same steps I did earlier. Now I will not format these as currencies because they're not currencies, so I'll leave the formatting just as numbers. But I'll come down to item, I'll do more sort, I'll sort descending by sum of quantity, and then I will change it from the value filter to top 10 items by sum of quantity, and now I see my top 10 items. On chart number 3, I want top 10 customers by sales. So again, I'll come through and I will put in customer ID, or let's do customer name in the axis, and then I will find my extended price and put that in the values. That again is dollars, so I will choose from the drop down and set the formatting to currency. And again, I want top 10, so I will change where it says customer name to more sort, descending by extended price. I also want the value to be top 10 by extended price, and now I have my top 10 list. So let's go through. Oops, forgot to name the other title. So I want top 10 customers by sales, and this one is top 10 items by quantity. So that brings us to our 4th chart, and this is where I want to see my customer balances at any given point in time. So every time I pull it up, I want to know exactly what's in my customer balance now. So this one, we're going to leave off the SOP detail and go to the customer transaction. So I'll drag my customer number in the axis, and I'll put my customer balance in the value. But here we do want to still do the same thing. We want the top 10 customer balances. So again, on customer number, I'll do another more option sort, descending by sum of customer balance. and then I'll choose the top 10 in the value filters and make sure it's top 10 items by sum of customer balance. So then we'll change this title. Top 10 customer balances. All right, cool. So we've done a lot of really nifty work here. Now I want to get rid of these little side filters. I don't want all these numbers to appear. So I'm going to highlight this first chart. And then you'll see I have this under my Pivot Chart Tools on my Analyze tab. You see I have a Show Hide Fields buttons. If I click on the icon itself, the field buttons will go away. So I'm going to do this for each one of my charts. So I'll click on the chart, Pivot Chart Tools, Analyze, and then I'll click on the icon itself, and then I'll do the same for these other two. And that cleans up my graphs or my charts so my dashboard looks a whole lot cleaner. All right, we are really cooking with gas. This is looking really good. So the next thing we want to do is be able to tell it what restrictions we want to put in place. So for our sales, we want to be able to restrict by date ranges, by document types, whether or not it's been posted, and then we may even want to include some of those extra date formulas that we've been working on. So we'll start first by clicking on the first chart, and under my Pivot Chart Tools, under Analyze, you'll see I have an Insert Slicer. And I'm going to insert a couple slicers here. I'm going to insert SOP type, and these are now in alphabetical order. And I'm also going to include posting status. So it pops up two of them. Posting status will only always be 2. And then we have SOP type. So now, if I click on History, Chart 1 will only show me history. If I click on Open, Chart 1 will show me all the opens. Well, I want these, and the same will be true for invoices, returns, and so forth. Now I want these slicers to also work with my top 10 customers by sales and my top 10 customer items. So to do this, I'll just click on the first slicer, so I have my handlebars around it. And now I have slicer tools with an option ribbon. And then I'll have the slicer option called Report Connections. And this is where I can connect it to charts 2 and 3. So now when I choose Open, it will make changes in all 3 of these charts. I do not want it to change my customer balances because I always want it to tell me what my top 3 customer balances are. So now I can narrow down things like this. And so if I want to look at sales by given period, I'll choose History, and then on my SOP type I'll choose Invoice and Returns. Now this gives me my actual sales, but it does not tell me what time period. So again, I'll highlight Chart 1, and under my Pivot Chart Tools, on my Analyze ribbon, I'll choose Insert Timeline. Now I just see my date field. So now I'll select Document Type and click OK, and I'll put this down at the bottom, and I'll stretch it out. All right. So now, if I just select, for example, the first 4 months in 2014, you can see it does indeed update my charts. There only happen to be 2 items sold. Now, with my handlebars around my timeline, I could choose Timeline Tools, pull up my option ribbon, and then connect this timeline to charts 2 and 3 as well. So now everything is dynamically integrated. So if I want to see all open orders, I'll select all date ranges by clicking on this icon, select orders, and select open. And now I can see all of my open orders by the top 10 items by sales, top 10 customers by sales, and the top 10 items by quantities. The customer balance stays the same. Now, had I chosen to add a slicer for customer class, I might have wanted to include it for all the 4 charts. That's one other area to keep in mind. You also may opt to remove the slicer altogether, or the timeline slicer, and instead add a slicer for something from our date field. So what I'm going to do is click on the All button, and now I can have access to my dates. And I could say, perhaps I want to see a weekday. So if I have a weekday out here, again, if I'm interested in my first 4 months for things that were posted, So in that case, I just want invoice and returns because those are the only items I can post. I might come in and say, what were my sales on Friday? Which ones were best? What about Thursday? Looks like I don't even have top sales for items there. Looks like I'm not sure what's going on, but you could see how this would work, right? So it's very cool how you can make all kinds of things work for you. Let's get rid of this slicer. I'll just highlight it and delete it. And now let's deal with some color formatting. I'll click on my first slicer. I will then click on the chart style, and you can see I've got quite a few chart styles that I could choose from. I'll leave it blank, but I'm going to go to color, and I'll select a color scheme that works with my logo. And I'll do the same for all of these. And then maybe my customer balances, I want to choose something that is close to my logo, but maybe helps me identify that it's a little bit different. Now I'll do the same color schemes for my slicers and my timeline tools. So under timeline tools option, I can select a color range, and the same is true for my slicers. I may even want to group my slicers together. So with one of them selected, I'll hold my control key down and select the other, and then I might want to align them. So I'll align them to the left, and then I'll group them together. So now I can actually move them together, which makes it nice and neat, and then I could add in my logo. I'll just click Insert, Picture, and add the logo. Now one more thing that Mark Polino is always begging people to do is to go to View and remove the grid line so that you get much more of a dashboard feel. There's some more things you can do to make the control much more dashboardy if you want, but we'll stick with this right now, and I hope this helps.